contenu de ce programme s'adresse à un public de tous âges, mais déconseillé aux jeunes enfants.
Killer contortionists, blood-sucking creatures of the night, devil dolls, freaks of nature, diabolical schemers, pathological villains, and heroes. His ghoulish characters and twisted tales conjure up an image of the man as either the screen equivalent of Edgar Allan Poe or a pioneer in the craft of exploitation filmmaking. A man who truly let his hair down when it came to revealing his dark side to us on the screen, or a man whose artistic credo was that a sucker was born every minute, and who knew how to separate that sucker from his money with the lure of the unknown, the perverse, the forbidden. When it came to cinematic sensationalism and flirting with the taboo, this fearmaker of the silent and early sound years had no peer. A son of the South, like his mentor, the legendary film pioneer D.W. Griffith, Charles Albert Tod Browning was born in Louisville, Kentucky on July 12, 1880. He left home at the age of 16 to join a traveling carnival.
He was intrigued by the magic that it gave to the local people. You know, when it would show up, there was this mystic magic about it, in the sense that, you know, people would be buried alive, or the wild man from Borneo, or things like that, which, matter of fact, Browning was the barker for a sideshow, and they introduced a fellow as the wild man from Borneo, and it turned out to be a black gentleman from Mississippi in heavy makeup.
Browning quickly turned to performing, first as a clown, then as a contortionist and illusionist on riverboat shows along the Mississippi. He soon joined vaudeville, where he performed the same acts on stage, as well as doing comedy, song, and dance routines. Browning met D.W. Griffith in 1913 and jumped at the chance to join the Griffith team as an actor, stuntman, and assistant director. When Griffith went west to make bigger pictures in the sun-drenched valleys of a place not yet famous as Hollywood, Browning went with him. During the period he was working for Griffith in California, Tod Browning was involved in a terrible car crash that catapulted his name into the headlines. A high roller and a gambler with a fondness for liquor and fast cars, Browning had plowed his roadster into a carload of street rails one morning on the way home from an all-night party. One of his passengers, Griffith actor Elmer Booth, was killed instantly. Another member of the Griffith team, George A. Siegman, was severely injured, as was Browning himself. The sensational accident slowed Browning up, but not for long. Less than a year after the crash, he was back behind the wheel acting the part of the speedster who races Mae Marsh to save her husband from the gallows at the conclusion of Griffith's epic film, Intolerance. It was a sensational and highly exploitable bit of typecasting to which neither Griffith nor Browning were oblivious. Browning co-directed his first feature-length film, the Civil War drama Jim Bludso, the following year. 2 years later, in 1919, he signed a contract with Universal to direct The Wicked Darling. The film marked the beginning of a relationship between Browning and an up-and-coming actor in the film's cast that would have a profound effect on the careers of both men. The actor's name? Lon Chaney. Revered as one of the silent screen's most gifted and versatile actors, and the patron saint of the art of movie makeup, Lon Chaney specialized in roles that required him to disguise his features and contort his appearance to such an extent that he became known as the Man of 1,000 Faces. In Tod Browning, Chaney found a writer-director eager to exploit his abilities in ever more sensational ways. Chaney played monsters and bad guys for other directors, but the Browning-Chaney collaboration was a unique one that sustained itself through 10 pictures, more than Chaney made for any other single director.
It really was a rather interesting group of productions in here where Browning would dream up a character which had a double thumb and had to disguise himself because he had committed a murder and someone would recognize him. So he became an armless wonder. I mean, there's a strange type of mind that would create something like this.
If you can find some of the silent Tod Browning movies that star Lon Chaney Sr., you really should look for The Unknown, which co-stars Joan Crawford, or West of Zanzibar. I think if those movies were better known, people would have a totally different idea about the history of horror movies. Too many people are hung up on the Universal classics, the Frankenstein, Dracula movies. These came years before that. They're really a lot more inventive. They're scary. Chaney plays these really twisted characters in Tod Browning movies, and no director has ever duplicated the twisted scenarios in Tod Browning's silent movies.
Browning said his films with Chaney seldom evolved in the traditional way. Rather than selecting the story first, he would come up with the concept of the type of role he wanted Chaney to play, then find or write a story to fit that role or roles, for in Browning's films, Chaney frequently played dual or multiple parts. In their film Outside the Law, for example, Browning has one Lon Chaney kill the other Lon Chaney.
It's a really solid melodrama, crime melodrama, and very well made, moves very well, doesn't drag, and I think a film seen now, 70 years after its initial release, still holds the interest and still maintains the pace, and the audience isn't falling asleep or getting bored. Well, that certainly speaks well of a picture.
Browning wrote a vampire tale called The Hypnotist. It was filmed at MGM as London After Midnight, starring Lon Chaney in two roles, one of them a vampire, the other a detective. Typically, the film, which is now lost, presented the supernatural elements of the story as bogus come the final fade-out.
Unfortunately, as far as we know, it still does not exist. There was a print in the MGM vaults up until the mid-50s, I believe, and then there was a fire at one of these vaults where the print existed and it was destroyed.
I think that if that film were found, people would be essentially exceptionally disappointed in it, because it follows basically the exact same plot line as Mark of the Vampire.
Even if the film is great, you're going to be disappointed because of over the years the anticipation is built up to such an extreme that I don't think you could have the best made film in the world and it'll still be a disappointment.
Browning was also quick to recognize the box office value of having his Man of 1,000 Faces appear without makeup, too. In the 1928 gangster hit The Big City, Browning drew kudos from the critics for shrewdly allowing Chaney to shine in a role without resorting to makeup tricks. When Lon Chaney died of throat cancer in 1930, Tod Browning lost his star actor, an actor who was not only willing but able to transform himself into whatever bizarre character Browning conjured up next. The picture Tod Browning is best remembered for was the 1931 version of Dracula starring not Lon Chaney, but a Hungarian actor named Bela Lugosi.
I am Dracula. A moment ago, I stumbled upon a most amazing phenomenon. Something so incredible, I mistrust my own judgment. Look.
Dracula. The very mention of the name brings to mind things so evil, so fantastic, so degrading. You wonder if it isn't all a dream, a nightmare.
Rats. Rats. Thousands. Millions of them.
Dracula was the film that launched the first great cycle of screen horror in the American cinema. Its greatness and the reasons for its unique position in the annals of screen horror are rooted in Browning's firm grasp of the film's most daring concept and his eagerness to exploit it. Browning knew what Dracula was really all about: eroticism and sex.
He came to me. He opened and extended his arm, and he made me drink.
Dracula gave him the opportunity to portray these elements in a story that was atypical of the American horror cinema up to that time. In most such films, the supernatural ingredients of the story were usually explained away in the end as fraudulent. Dracula was different. Here, the monster was real.
Americans in the 20s, in the Jazz Age, did not believe apparently in supernatural beings, or did not find those type of things entertaining certainly from a horror film standpoint. But generally, you've got a parade of cats and bats and other hooded figures through all the American films of the 20s that are purported to be old house horror films, haunted houses and such, where the least suspected of the group is unmasked at the end to be revealed as the cat or the bat or whatever.
Dracula obviously was a milestone. It set up the horror genre.
Well, I think Dracula is certainly a great film. It's certainly an important film. It's really, in some ways, the first modern horror film. I mean, as far as being a talkie as opposed to being a silent picture.
Dracula was a project Browning had fixed on for years. He tried without success to purchase the screen rights to Hamilton Dean's stage adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel, even before the play crossed the Atlantic and became a hit on the Broadway stage.
Why is Dracula so stagey? I think what he was doing was giving the people in the motion picture theater the opportunity to see a stage play.
So rather than having Dracula filmed with the use of a lot of exteriors, you've got Dracula essentially as a stage play brought right into your local theater.
Universal had signed Browning to a 3-picture deal, and this was a film that he was born to direct. He wanted Chaney, of course, and the unfortunate thing was that Chaney had passed away, and he couldn't use him.
We don't know what Lon Chaney's conception of Dracula would have been like had he made that with Browning, although we can tell from London After Midnight that he probably would have indulged in, some extravagant makeup effects, which of course Bela Lugosi did not do. And Lugosi relied on really his own presence and his own magnetism.
Despite the sensation he'd caused in the role of Dracula, Bela Lugosi was neither equipped to step into Chaney's shoes, nor was he willing to try. Lugosi balked at the idea of disguising himself under pounds of makeup and lost the opportunity to advance his career as a major horror star in Frankenstein for that reason. Rather than keep searching for a new Lon Chaney, Tod Browning took a more sensational step. He cast his next film not with actors wearing makeup to look disfigured and crippled, but with sideshow performers whose twisted shapes and missing limbs were grimly real. The film was Freaks.
Tod Browning's most outrageous movie is Freaks. Nobody could top that.
Freaks, I think, is one of the great films of all time.